Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my channel, Clavi Flauto. My name is, let's start with my English name. My English name is taken from my baptismal name, which is Joseph Xavier, after Saint Joseph and Saint Francis Xavier. And my Vietnamese name is Nguyen Bang Nam, starting with the surname Nguyen, then ending with the first name Nam. So I am a college student based here in Kentucky, Danville, Kentucky, in a very small liberal arts college called Center College. And oh, first of all, Happy New Year to all of you. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. It's already January 3rd here in America. So in this video, I'd like to introduce sort of like the challenge I'd like to do against myself, the challenge I have for myself for this year. It's sort of like a New Year resolution for me. Even though it's pretty late, I thought of this challenge. I came up with it like when I thought of it like at 4 a.m. last night, but I came out with it really late. It's already past New Year, but there's still time. So I think to myself, why not just record this and then set this challenge for myself? Because even though it's already New Year, it's still not the first week of New Year yet. January 1st was on Thursday, if I remember it correctly. So January 5th is going to be the start of the new week of the new year, the first week of New Year. So this challenge is going to be like a weekly challenge, I guess, on a weekly basis. So I decided to name this challenge the Xavier challenge or the Xavier challenge. So basically, the challenge name and also the challenge content basically is taken after the very famous Catholic saint, Saint Francis Xavier. If anyone of you know him, he's a very famous missionary, one of the most famous actually. Ever since the time of the apostles went to every single corner of the known world at the time to preach the gospel and all of that in many different tongues. But Saint Francis Xavier, he was originally from Navarre, which is in the Pyrenees mountain region between France and Spain. And then he became a Jesuit. He was one of the first seven Jesuits. And then he became the Apostolic Nuncio. So basically, the sort of like the Vatican ambassador to countries in the East, in the territory where the Portuguese reigned in the East at the time. So that includes anything from India eastward, basically. So he became the Apostolic Nuncio, and he went to lots of different countries in the East, to preach the gospel. So in total, I think he started from his journey in Lisbon, in Portugal. He went by ship for around a year, and then he landed in Goa, in India, which is the base of Portuguese Goa, like the Portuguese territory in India at the time. So he landed in Goa, and then he went to the fishery coast. I think it's called the Pearl Coast, the fishery coast of the Kingdom of Pandya. I think it's the Kingdom of Pandya in modern day Tamil Nadu, which is a state in southern India. And then he went from there. He went also to Sri Lanka. He preached the gospel in Sri Lanka as well. And then he went from there to the Southeast Asia, to Malacca, Portuguese Malacca, which is a city and a state now in Malaysia. And then he went to the Moluccas, which is the different group of islands, archipelagos in Indonesia, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. He also went to Masakar, which is I think a city in Indonesia. So he went to a lot of places, and then he went from Malaysia and Indonesia at the time. He went upward after receiving an invitation from a Japanese ronin or wandering samurai named Anjiro. So he accepted the invitation of Anjiro. He went to Japan and he preached the gospel in Japan for like 2 years or so. He went as far as Kyoto, which is the old capital of Japan, and then from there he went back. He went back to Malaysia, I think, and then to India once again. And in 1552, in April of 1552, he set on another journey to go to China with a goal to like evangelizing in China. But December 3rd of 1552, when he was residing on the island of Shangchuan, off the coast of Fujian province, modern-day Fujian province in China, at the time a part of the territory of the Ming Dynasty, While resting on that island, he passed away from a fever. And he passed away at the age of 46. But his sort of like his works, his missionary works, is the basis for all of the fellow like Jesuits following that to come to the East and preach. So you see Jesuits on Mato Ricci in China. You see Jesuits being martyred in Japan. You see Jesuits in India. You see Jesuits in all corners of Asia. That's all thanks to Saint Francis Xavier. And yeah, a big part of the Catholic communities being present in in East Asia, in the Far East, is all thanks to Saint Francis Xavier. Yeah, so he was canonized in 1622 by Pope Gregory the 15th, and now he's become a very celebrated saint all over the world. In fact, my ancestor was also a saint. My ancestor, ninth generation ancestor, saying Emmanuel Xavier Chiu, Saint Emmanuel Xavier William Chiu. He was a Catholic priest in Vietnam. He was a martyr. He was beheaded for the faith in 1798. He took the surname Xavier in Portuguese, or Xavier in English, in addition to his baptismal name Emmanuel, to commemorate Saint Francis Xavier, his favorite saint. So that's why me right now, Joseph Xavier, also took the name Xavier in honor of Saint Francis Xavier, and in honor of my ancestor, Saint Emmanuel Xavier. So yeah, another peculiar things that I want to mention is that Saint Francis Xavier was born in 1506, and I was born in 2006. And my ancestor, Saint Emmanuel Xavier, was born in 1756. So the distance between the three of us, between Saint Francis Xavier and Saint Emmanuel Xavier's birth, is 250 years. And distance between me and my ancestor, Saint Emmanuel Xavier, is also 250 years. And the distance in total between me and Saint Francis Xavier is exactly 500 years, which is like a crazy coincidence in my opinion. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So why do I name it the Xavier Challenge after all of that? So Saint Francis Xavier, he was a great missionary, and being a great missionary, he learns a lot of languages. He was a very sort of like well-known polyglot, because he studied different languages in the countries that he went to evangelize. Of course, if you cannot speak the language of the people who you're trying to preach the gospel to, how are you supposed to like penetrate their mind in terms of like what this word means, or what this prayer means, So yeah, Saint Francis Xavier, he learned a lot of languages. Yeah, he became a very, very fluent polyglot in many East Asian languages at the time. Even though his understanding is kind of debatable, he might have only know some languages like to a very basic degree of being able to hold a conversation. That's pretty much it, because he relies a lot on the local translators and local catechumens who help him translate the prayers and all of that. So yeah, it's a bit debatable, but Saint Francis Xavier, still overall a very, very excellent missionary, and also a very much eager polyglot. Basically, he studies the language of the people who he wants to evangelize to. So this challenge is what I'm setting for myself, and it's a polyglot challenge. Basically, I'm trying to learn the languages, and not just any languages, not just any languages that I like, but the languages that Saint Francis Xavier learned throughout his lifetime, ever since his birth until his death, in order to help his missionary works. So I'm doing this as a way to first honor Saint Francis Xavier. He's my favorite saint, and also very great historical figure in my opinion. Second, honor my ancestor, Saint Emmanuel Xavier, the Vietnamese priest who was martyred for his faith. He never got the chance to travel anywhere. His friend, yeah, got a chance to travel to like Macau, India, and Portugal, but he never got anywhere because he had to help the Vietnamese community back in his home country. So he also got martyred at a very relatively young age, at 42. So yeah, but yeah, so that's two things, and then the third thing is that I just want to learn new languages, because I'm pretty sick of myself not learning any new languages or for these past few years. The only three languages I speak are: number one, English; number two, Vietnamese, my mother tongue; number three, Japanese. Yeah, I speak English and Japanese. English very much better than Japanese. Japanese kind of like a intermediate level, I would say. And also I'm learning French here in college, but that hasn't gone anywhere yet so far. Yeah, I can read French, but I cannot understand much. That's the degree I'm having right now. So yeah, those are the three reasons why I'm doing this challenge and why I name it the Xavier challenge. I like Xavier because it's the Portuguese pronunciation. It's a lot better than Xavier. Yeah, Xavier is like, yeah, it sounds so weird. Xavier sounds better. So the Xavier challenge, what are the languages in the Xavier challenge that I'm doing right now? So there will be in total of, let me see, should be, if I remember correctly, actually I'll just name them all in the order of Saint Francis Xavier's life, which language he learned first and which language he learned last. I'm just gonna name it like that. So the first language of this challenge, oh, and basically for another thing, the challenge is gonna be conducted based on a weekly basis. So for a certain amount of weeks, I'm gonna spend on studying one language until at the end of that period, I have to reach a certain level of fluency, and then I have to record myself, a video of myself speaking that language to whatever degree it is that I achieved during that time. So I can learn one language and then speak it very much fluently, and I can learn another language and I still struggle with like saying very basic sentences, but I still record it because it's a challenge. So you gotta follow every single mark of the challenge itself. So okay, so that's pretty much it for the challenge. It's gonna be conducted in exactly 1 year, exactly 1 year. So 54 weeks in a year. In exactly 1 year, I'm gonna learn all of these languages that Saint Francis Xavier once learned to speak, but only in a few weeks for each languages, basically. I'm not going to be able to speak them in the same level of St. Francis Xavier spoke, but at least I'll get the feeling of what he learns, sort of like what he did when he learned those languages, and sort of like what sort of way that he spoke those languages. It's going to be pretty fascinating for me, for a person who loves St. Francis Xavier. So, what are these languages? Just get to the core. So, the languages are as following, and we'll list them in order of when Saint Francis Xavier spoke them, learned them. The first one is Navarro-Romance. Navarro-Romance. So this is a very obscure language, basically. Navarro-Romance is a language that belongs to the Pyrenees Mozarabic language family, which is a branch of the, I think, the Romance language for sure. The Romance languages are like, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, etc. And Navarro-Romance was one of those languages. So Saint Francis Xavier was born in the castle of Xavier near the city of Sangüesa in southern, sort of like southern middle Navarre, which is a autonomous community right now here in Spain. So in that autonomous community, there was a division between the north and the south. So in Navarre, the northern people at the time spoke Basque, which is an isolated language, but the southern people spoke Navarro-Romance or Aragonese or Castilian Spanish. All three of these languages are very closely related to each other, especially Aragonese and Navarro-Romance. So basically, Aragonese and Navarro-Romance used to be the same language during the time of Saint Francis Xavier. In the 16th century, both of these languages were grouped under the same group, Navarro-Aragonese. So Navarro-Aragonese was the language that Saint Francis Xavier spoke, and it has 6 different dialects, and Navarro-Romance was one of those dialects. But Navarro-Romance died out in the 17th century. It was a language used for administrative purposes in the Kingdom of Navarre. So Saint Francis Xavier, who had learned that language from a very young age, from his mother, his father, because they both speak the language, because they have to write in the language as well, But he wouldn't but his later generations, they won't speak that language at all. They will switch overall to Castilian Spanish, because after the conquest of Navarre in 1512, the Spanish forced the language Castilian Spanish onto the southern Navarrese people, and that's why the language died out. And up until this present day, in the Navarro-Aragonese language family, out of all the 6 dialects, the only dialect that survived is Aragonese, and it's spoken by only around for like 12,000 people in like northern Aragon, which is like the nationality or community right next to Navarre. So it's spoken by only 12,000 people. Yeah, it's a very obscure language. Navarro Romance is already an extinct language. But what I'm trying to do here is I'm probably going to study Aragonese first. Aragonese is going to be my basis because it's the only branch, only dialect of that language family that survived. So Aragonese is the only one to survive. I'm going to study that one. But Navarro Romance, we still have a lot of documents written in that language. So I'm going to learn Aragonese for speaking, but I'm going to learn Navarro Romance for reading, basically, in order to get a feeling of both languages. Because Aragonese and Navarrese or Navarro Romance were very close to each other, basically belonging to the same language but only different dialects. So if I learn Aragonese, I'm going to be able to speak the language. But if I learn Navarro Romance, I'm going to be able to read the documents in the time of St. Francis Xavier. So that's the first language I'm going to start with. And a lot of people have the misconception that St. Francis Xavier was fully Basque, in origin. So that's why he got to speak Basque as his mother tongue. It's actually not true because St. Francis Xavier's ancestor, his paternal ancestors, came from Untra Puertos, which is a city in the Lower Navarre. That city is called a Basque country speaking city because all the people there speak Basque. His grandfather, St. Francis Xavier grandfather, definitely spoke Basque. His father definitely spoke Basque, but him, not so sure, because his ancestor, his mother's ancestors, the rulers of the castle of Xavier and the lords of Xavier, they resided in Xavier for over 250 years. And during all of those 250 years, the only language in Xavier was Navarro-Aragonese. So they didn't speak any Basque at all. So Basque was not his mother tongue. So yeah, that's a conflict for there. But the second language is Basque. The second language is Basque. So Saint Francis Xavier, even though he didn't speak Basque as his mother tongue, he was still familiar with a lot of Basque vocabularies because his paternal ancestors were Basque, and there were a lot of Basque people in Navarre at the time, especially in northern Navarre. So he's got to have some level of familiarity with the language. So yeah, that's gonna be the second language for sure. And Basque is an isolated language. We have no idea which language family it belongs to. It derives from like an ancient language in the region. I think it's called Vascones, or it's an ancient region that the Romans describe in their books. But yeah, I believe they're descended from those people. And the Basque people is very, very vocal, sort of like in terms of their influence on the Spanish-speaking world. A lot of Spanish surnames like Garcia is actually from Basque, Garcia. And a lot of Basque people migrated to Latin America as well, to Central America, to other countries around the Spanish colonial empire. So yeah, and the Basque people, Basque is a language, the mother tongue of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Ignatius of Loyola was the mentor and closest friend of Saint Francis Xavier. They were like 10 years apart of each other in terms of age, but they were very close friends. So Saint Ignatius of Loyola was Basque. He was 100% pure Basque. He spoke Basque as his mother tongue. He had to learn Castilian Spanish at a young age. But St. Francis Xavier was the opposite. St. Francis Xavier spoke Navarro-Aragonese at a young age, but he learned Basque, a few words of Basque from his fathers and maybe his close sort of friends, I guess, in the region who spoke Basque. So they are the two opposites of each other. Just to mention, because a lot of people often often take it for mistaken that Saint Francis Xavier was from Navarre, so he must have spoken Basque because Navarre is basically Basque country. Navarre is Basque country, yeah, but not all Navarrese identify as Basque. Northern Navarrese identify more as Basque than Southern Navarrese. Southern Navarrese speak Castilian Spanish more fluently these days. But in the past, they used to speak Navarro-Aragonese more fluently compared to Basque. But yeah, So first language, Navarro-Aragonese, and second language, Basque. Those are the two ancestral languages of San Francis Xavier. So now we move on to the third language, which is Castilian Spanish, or just basically continental Spanish. So this Spanish variant is the one that St. Francis Xavier will have learned from a very young age, because Navarro-Aragonese speaker must learn Castilian Spanish from a very young age, because Castilian Spanish is a language of the most powerful kingdom at the time in the Iberian Peninsula, the Kingdom of Castile and Leon. So the Kingdom of Castile and Leon, they were the biggest kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula, the most instrumental in getting the Muslims in the conquistador out of the Iberian Peninsula. So because of all of that, the people of Castile or speak the language Castilian Spanish, and the language became very dominant all over in the entire Iberian Peninsula. So all of the people in the Iberian Peninsula, no matter where they came from, must have some degree of understanding of Castilian Spanish. So that's why it's going to be Castilian Spanish or Continental Spanish that I'm going to study as a third language after Navarro-Aragonese and Basque. So Continental Spanish, by the way, is different from Latin American Spanish. Latin American Spanish is a language of the colonial people who were colonized by the Spanish Empire back in the 15th, 16th century. No, actually 16th, 17th century up until the 20th century, I think. Continental Spanish is a lot different, a bit different in terms of pronunciation and words and vocabulary from Latin American Spanish. In terms of grammar, they're pretty much the same, but in terms of pronunciation, there's a lot of differences. So for example, like the mythical historical, not really historical, I think he's historical, the mythical figure of El Cid, the knight in the Castilian Spanish romance. I can't recall where that's from, but El Cid would be pronounced El Cid in Southern America, but well, in Spain, it's gonna be his name is gonna be pronounced El Cid. So it's totally different. It's not El Cid, it's El Cid. So that's the difference between Castilian Spanish and Latin American Spanish. I'm gonna study Castilian Spanish because that's the language that Saint Francis Xavier spoke, not Latin American Spanish. So yeah, and the fourth language is gonna be French. So Saint Francis Xavier was sent to France at the age of, I believe he was sent there in 1524. So he would have been like 18 at the time. So pretty much the ripe age for going to college. So Saint Francis Xavier was sent to Paris, to the Collège Saint-Barbe, or the College of Saint Barbe in Paris, which is part of the University of Paris at the time. And he was sent there. He had to speak French. So because he's gonna be living in the center of the French-speaking world, the center of the intellectual movements of all around Europe, and at the time, French was all the hype. People speak French and people learn French, and it's the language of administrative purposes, and also for communications of the intellectual communities all across Europe, aside from Latin, basically. So yeah, French is very popular. So he will have to learn French very much fluently. So and also French, the Saint Francis Xavier, he lived in France for like 11 years. He never returned to his home country after he went to France. So at the age of 18, he set out to go to Paris, and then he never go back. He just stayed in Paris, and then he became a Jesuit, and then he never visited his house. He just sent letters home, and that's all. Yeah. So he spent 11 years in France. So his French would have to be like excellent. So have to be able to speak French just like a French native and all of that. So yeah, French is gonna be the fourth language. Another thing is that Saint Francis Xavier's paternal ancestor came from, as I said before, the city of Untarapuetos, San Juan Untarapuetos, which is a city in the Lower Navarre country. It's the capital. It's actually the capital of Lower Navarre. So Navarre, after 1512, the conquest of Navarre was split in two. So the independent kingdom of Navarre ceased to exist, but Navarre was split in two: Upper Navarre and Lower Navarre. So Saint Francis Xavier came from Lower Navarre, which is became part of France, became part of the France, and very close to Gascon in France actually. But Upper Navarre, which is where Saint Francis Xavier was actually born in, became part of Spain as a kingdom of Navarre. So there, after 1512, there became like two kingdom of Navarres. Lower kingdom of Lower Navarre, ruled by a French nobility, French royal house, and the upper kingdom of Navarre in the south, actually, ruled by the King of Spain. King of Spain at the time also claimed the title of the King of Navarre, King and Queen of Navarre. So yeah, so Saint Francis Xavier, when he was canonized, there was a lot of debate between France and Spain about like who should claim him as their, as their saint, and the Spanish saying that, oh, he was born in Javier. He was born in the Xavier, the castle of Xavier in Upper Navarre in Spain. He's a Spanish. And then the French say, no, that cannot be because he studied in Paris and also his ancestors were from Lower Navarre, which is in France. So he must be French. And then the Pope just decided that, well, we're going to settle this dispute by claiming him as a Navarrese saint. So he's neither French nor Spanish. He was Navarrese, just Navarre. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, French, definitely gonna have to learn that. And I learned French in college, but it's honestly, my French is not very good, so I'm gonna have to brush up on that anyway. So this challenge will be a good way for me to brush up on that. All right, so the fifth language he will have learned to speak is Latin. So Latin is the language, the universal language of Europe at the time, like of all of Europe, basically. Every single person has to learn to speak Latin if they want to be considered like an intellectual. If they want to correspond with other scholars all around Europe, they have to learn Latin. And the Latin here is Ecclesiastical Latin, not classical Latin, not the Latin that Virgil, not the Latin that Caesar spoke, but into Ecclesiastical Latin, the Latin that's been influenced over time by vernacular languages and also by the church, basically. That's why it's called ecclesiastical. So Saint Francis Xavier, when he went to Paris, he will have to learn Latin very much intensively, to the point that he can, well, read Bible in Latin, and also read the Gospels in Latin and all of that, and also he will have been able to write in Latin, and also to read canon laws in Latin, because it's a fact that Saint Francis Xavier went to study for canon law degree in Paris. So he didn't go to study like just like civic law or anything. Like he went to study canon law, which is law of the church, the law of the Catholic Church. So he would have to like have an excellent command of Latin in order to be able to speak, write, not really speak because it's pretty much a dead language. Nobody speaks it. But he would have been able to learn to write it, and also learn to write it and then read it and then understand it and all of that. And also he went to Paris to study to become a priest in Malay. So he would also have to learn how to speak it with the ecclesiastical pronunciation to celebrate Mass in Latin, because it's the Tridentine Mass. No, it's a Latin Mass, so he would have to learn how to speak it in order to celebrate Mass. So yeah, that's why I also put ecclesiastical Latin on my list for the languages here. So it's a very important language, and I'm definitely gonna have to learn it. And also I've been trying to learn Latin for some times now. It's been pretty hard, but I'm gonna have to find time to do that this year in this challenge. So after that one, the sixth language where we're gonna come across is Portuguese. So Saint Francis Xavier in Paris, he became a university student. He was very sort of like he was a very sort of like frat boy sort of figure, because he went to a lot of different entertainment centers in Paris with his friends, and then he joined in a lot of different parties and all of that. He also squandered a lot of his money that was given to him by his family in Navarre to like those parties and all of that. He became a very famous sort of like social figure in Paris at the time, and because of that, he went bankrupt. He went bankrupt basically, and his close friend Pierre Faber introduced him to Ignatius of Loyola. They met each other there. At first Xavier wasn't really into Loyola. Xavier was very much against Loyola because Loyola also participated in the campaign to, in 1512 to defend Pamplona from the invasion of the French to free independent Navarre. So Loyola at the time was a captain. Loyola was on the loyal to the Spanish side, but Xavier's and his family, his brothers, fought on the independent Navarre side, supported by the French. So these two are like enemies to each other in terms of political stance. So at first Xavier didn't really like Loyola, but then Loyola really helped him a lot during the time in Paris. So he lent him a lot of money. And then like Xavier was just really like after that had like a deep gratitude towards Loyola, and then he listened to Loyola a lot, and then he regarded Loyola afterwards as his mentor and master. He addressed Ignatius of Loyola as a master in his letters, actually. So yeah, and after that, Ignatius of Loyola founded on the mountain of Montmartre, which is a suburb nowadays in Paris in France. Ignatius of Loyola, together with Pierre Faber, Francis Xavier, and four more college Sambar students, came to make a vow with each other to become priests, and then to preach, like to proclaim the vows of the three evangelical vows of chastity, poverty, and I forgot the last one. Oh my goodness. Chastity. Oh, obedience. Yeah, obedience. So they proclaimed the three vows with each other, and then the fourth vow to go to Jerusalem to preach gospel to the infidels. So yeah, they make the vows on the mountain, and then they go to Rome to meet the Pope to ask him to found a new religious order for them. And then the Pope says, yeah, fine. Paul III was like, fine, yeah, you guys are free to do that because I'm really against, well, the Protestants anyway. So if you guys can do anything to help change the Protestant Reformation or to stem it from going any further, then I'll gladly do that. But then Pope Paul III asked them not to go to Jerusalem, but instead to stay in Rome, and become priests who can help the communities all around Rome to become more educated. So yeah, that was like the start of the Jesuit, the Society of Jesus. But then in the year 15, I forgot the year. It was about 31. In the year 1547, I believe. It was 31 at the age of that. Oh, 1537. Yeah, I'm sorry. 1537. In year 1537, the king of Portugal at the time, King Joan, I think Joan the Third. Yeah, King Joan asked the Pope to send some priests over to Portugal so that he can send them to the New World, to the east, to the Portuguese colonies in the east, to educate the Portuguese settlers and Portuguese officers in the east, who were becoming like very, very sort of like very much striving away from the right path, from the righteous path, because they were like intermarrying with local indigenous women, and also they were also abandoning mass and all of that. They stopped going to mass and all of that thing. So the king of Portugal was not really happy with that. So he asked the Pope to send some priests over so that he can help get those priests over to the new world. I mean, no, not the new world, but to the east, to educate the Portuguese and bring them back to the right way. So yeah, so Ignatius, the Pope asked Society of Jesus, and the Society of Jesus asked Ignatius of Loyola, the founder, asked at first the two members, Simon Rodriguez and Nicolas Bombadilla, to go to Portugal to become the priest to help the Portuguese king. But Nicolas Bombadilla became sick in the last minute, so Francis Xavier stepped in. Yeah, and then he was very much reluctantly sent to Portugal. So he has to start learning Portuguese. So that's why the whole journey of him going to Portugal, that's why the Portuguese language is on this list. So he learned Portuguese during the time in Lisbon to speak to the king, to speak to the courtiers, to the court officers, to the court officials, to the nobility at the time. and because he also had to learn it to speak to the Portuguese sailors in the east if he wants to educate them. So he went to Portugal. He meets the king. The king blesses him. The king greets him and all of that. And then the king keeps Simon Rodriguez behind because Simon Rodriguez is a Portuguese. So the king says that, oh, I want a Portuguese priest here to be my confessor, to be the confessor of the nobility in the court. So he kept Simon Rodriguez and he sent Francis Xavier to the east. And that's how Francis Xavier, very much reluctantly and without any plan at all, became the history change maker. Yeah, by going to the east and then becoming the progenitor of a lot of Catholic communities in the east, in East Asia. So yeah, he would have to learn Portuguese to a very much intermediate level to speak to the Japanese. To the Portuguese sailors and all of that. So that's why Portuguese is on this list. And also a lot of documents I want to read about Francis Xavier is in Portuguese. So that's why I've got to learn this language for sure. All right, so that was the sixth language, and it was a very long introduction because I had to tell the stories in full for people to understand it. All right, so the seventh language is Tamil. Tamil. So this is the second non-Indo-European language in this whole list, and also the first language that is in the East. So Tamil is a language that belongs to the I think it's a pretty offensive word, but the name of the language family is Dravidian. I'm pretty sure that Tamil people don't like being called Dravidian. They like to be called by a different name that I cannot recall for some reason. So I'm just gonna say Dravidian for now. So yeah, sorry for that. But Tamil is a language that belongs to the Dravidian language family. And it's a language that's still spoken to this day in southern India, especially in, Tamil Nadu, in Sri Lanka. Those are the two places where Tamil is most likely is very much widely spoken. Sri Lanka is a country, and Tamil Nadu is a state in southern India. So yeah, Tamil is a very much widespread language at the time for the people of southern India. So when Francis Xavier, when he went to India, so his journey started in the year 1537, and he spent a year on a ship. Very much miserable life on the ship. Then he went to Madagascar, stopped there for a few days, and then he went to Goa, which is a state in modern day, which is a city state, modern day in India, in the, I think it's in the western side of India. So Goa was the base of Portuguese India at the time. It was the administrative center. It was pretty much the capital of Portuguese India at the time. So he went to Goa, and then at first in Goa, his only mission was to preach to the Portuguese sailors and to Portuguese speakers in the city. So he started out as that. He started out as a priest, as a professor at a seminary in Goa to teach to native Goan seminarians who are also Portuguese speakers. So yeah, he preached the language. He preached in Portuguese in Goa, but then I think in the year 1542 or so, he heard of a group of people in the fishery coast alongside southern India called the Paravas. So the Paravas is a group of people. They hunt, they go fishing, and then go fishing. That's the first thing. Also, they were people who were pearl finders. So they find the pearls to sell to Portuguese at the time. So that's why the Portuguese know them as the fishery pearl people. So the Paravas in southern India spoke Tamil, but they were converts to Catholics for a very long time in order to achieve protection from the neighboring countries by appealing to the Portuguese. But then they were converts, but they were not very fervent converts. They were more like political converts. They converted for the sake of being able to seek protection from the Portuguese. So that's why when they were in the periphery coast, a lot of them didn't really understand anything about Christianity at all. They were pretty much just there. They were just converts for political purposes. So Saint Francis Xavier heard of this, and he thinks to himself that no, this cannot be right. If these people are converts, I must teach them everything I know. Otherwise, they were just there for, in like outer looks, they're Catholics, but they're actually not living Catholic lives at all. So Saint Francis Xavier, he went to the fishery coast in modern day Tamil Nadu in India, in southern India, and he learned Tamil. I think it was pretty much the first language, the first official indigenous language that he learned. Because Tamil was the language of all pretty much lots of people in southern India, so he has to learn it, and he translated the Lord's Prayer, lots of different prayers and the Gospels into Tamil Nadu. He didn't learn it to a very fluent degree. I'm gonna say that because he relied a lot on local Tamil and also Paravas catechumens who helped him translate the works, while he himself spoke to the Tamils in Tamil, but very much to a conversational level, not to like an expert or academic level, I would say. And yeah, when he went there, he was a very successful preacher, and then he became like a very popular figure among the Parawas and the Tamil people in the south. And the Tamil Catholics in modern day southern India, who are Catholics, are mostly thanks to Saint Francis Xavier, because he reintroduced the Catholic faith to the Tamil people. The Tamil people, and also the people in Keralas and Malayalam, they were already Christians for a very long time, because Saint Thomas the Apostle was the first apostle and also the first person to preach gospel in India, and he preached in Kerala, which is also in southern India, but they speak a different language. It's called Malayalam. So a lots of Tamils were already pretty much Christians, but they were not Catholics. So Saint Francis Xavier reintroduced the newly converts Paravas to the Catholic faith, and also lots of other Christians who are not from the Catholic Church, to reintroduce them back to the Catholic faith and all of that. So yeah, he was very successful in southern India, and he's still commemorated to this day with lots of churches named after him, and with a lot, yeah, there's also a cathedral named after him in southern India. So Tamil definitely on the list. It's gonna be a very hard language because the script of Tamil is also totally distant from any scripts I know of. So it's gonna be a pretty challenging thing for this challenge. Yeah. All right. So that was Tamil. All right. That was the seventh one. Eighth language. The eighth language is gonna be. Oh my goodness, I can't remember. Malay, Bahasa Melayu, or Bahasa Indonesia. So Malay is much easier language, I would say, to learn right now. So why Malay? So Saint Francis Xavier, he doesn't really stop at Tamil Nadu. He doesn't really stop at southern India. He heard once again that there are Portuguese settlers in the Southeast Asia archipelagos who were also marrying like Malay women at that time, and then they have like children, they have their families, but then they were starting to strive away from the Catholic faith. They stopped going to church and all of that. So he went to Malacca, which is the city in the country of Malaysia nowadays. He went to Malacca at the time called Portuguese Malacca because it was a Portuguese colony. He went there and he preached to the people. He also preached to the natives of that island who speak Malay, who spoke Malay. So that's how he came to learn the Malay language, and he also became a very much successful preacher there. And he went to next to the islands of Moluccas, also called the Spices Islands, because that's where most of the spices that the Portuguese traded with the local Malay people came from. So he went to Moluccas. In Moluccas, there were not a lot of Portuguese, so he preached to the people there entirely in Malay instead of Portuguese. So Malay would have been the language that he has to have a very much good command of in order to be able to speak to the people there. But yeah, Malay is I have experience with Malay before, Bahasa Melayu. So it's a pretty simple language to learn. I think it's I think overall the language is agglomerative, which is language that adds root, keep adding like suffix and prefixes to root in order to create meanings and all of that. So I have experience with Japanese. Japanese is agglomerative also. So yeah, Bahasa Melayu is gonna be a pretty good journey, I would say, for the challenge. Let's say so that was Bahasa Melayu, and the last one on this list, the ninth language. I think it's the ninth one. Yeah, the ninth language is gonna be Japanese. So Japanese. So Saint Francis Xavier, he resided in Malays, and at the time there was a Japanese ronin or wandering samurai. This samurai killed one of his fellow samurais in his domain back in Japan, so he has to escape to Malaysia at the time, to the Malaccas, in order to escape being killed. And this samurai's name was Anjiro. Anjiro. So Anjiro came to Malay, came to Malacca, and he was introduced to Francis Xavier by the Portuguese sailors. And Anjiro spoke to Saint Francis Xavier, and then he was convinced that the Catholic faith was a true faith and all of that. So he was baptized. He was the first Japanese convert. He was the first Japanese Catholic. And he was baptized Paulo de Santa Fe, or Paul of the Holy Faith. And Anjiro helped guide Francis Xavier throughout the lands in Japan, and Anjiro convinced Francis Xavier that Japan is a very good place for him to stop at to evangelize if he wants to go to countries beyond even Malay. So that's why Francis Xavier was very much appealed by this, and then in the year 1549 he set out on a journey with Anjiro and two other Jesuits to go to Japan, and they landed in Japan. Actually, on the way to Japan, they actually went across my country, Vietnam, I think around 2 times. And then San Francisco Xavier actually might very much have stopped in my hometown, maybe my hometown for like 2 to 3 days to stop to take a break before he goes to Japan, because that is the most popular route for at the time Chinese sailors. They went with the Chinese ship. So Chinese sailors at the time had to go to a very long route in order to get to Japan. So they went from Malaysia. They went from Malaysia, and then they zigzag across the they call it the South China Sea, but they call it the East Sea. So they navigate across the sea, and then they went across the coast, and they had to stop in at the time Cochin China, which is the place where my ancestors came from, in Cochin China. So they have to zigzag across Cochin China, and then they have to follow the coast of China in Fujian, in the Fujian province, Guangdong province, and all of the coastal provinces. And then they have to go across the coastal line. They have to hug along the shore before they come to Japan. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty honored that he came to Vietnam for like maybe 2 or 3 days. He didn't really preach, but he just stayed there. So I'd say that that's a pretty good ride. Yeah. So yeah, he went to Japan, and they actually came to Japan on the 27th of July. I think 27th of July. They came to the province of Kagoshima. Kagoshima at the time belonging to the domain of the Ryuzoji clan. They came to Kagoshima, but they didn't have the permission to land on the shore until the 15th of August, 1549, which is on the Feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. On that day, they were allowed to land in Kagoshima, and that day marked the start of the Japanese Catholic Church of Christianity in Japan. Before that day, there was no Christianity in Japan. Everything was like pretty much closed off. Japan and the outer world pretty much closed off. Nothing much. After that day, everything changes, and Westerners first became widely known in all around Japan. So that's all thanks to Saint Francis Xavier. So on the Assumption Feast, he landed in Kagoshima, and then he met the daimyo, or the leading, I'll say that the feudal lord of the Kagoshima domain. He met the feudal lord there, and then he convinced the feudal lord to allow him to stay and then to preach to the Portuguese and to the Japanese. The feudal lord was very happy with this because he thinks that, well, it'll be a good thing. More trade with the Portuguese, why not? More guns, all of that thing. So just let St. Francis Xavier stay and all of that. And then he didn't really stop in Kagoshima. He went to like other domains in the island of Kyushu in southern Japan. So Japan is made up of like 4 different islands: Hokkaido, Honshu, which is the biggest one, Shikoku, which is the one with 4 countries, and Kyushu, which is the southernmost one. So he went to Kyushu. He went all around Kyushu. He went to preach the gospel to all around Kyushu and all of that. Then he went to his most successful base was in modern day province of Nagasaki, which is where the atomic bomb later landed in the year 1945. So he went to Nagasaki, and then he became a very successful preacher, much to the point that the daimyo of the Nagasaki domain, of the Omura domain in Nagasaki, converted to Catholicism, converted to Christianity, became the first Christian daimyo of the entirety of Japan. His name was Bartholomew, Dom Bartholomew. His sons also became a Catholic and all of that, but later their descendants abandoned the faith because of the persecution. But yeah, so yeah, very much inspiring stuff. And then he didn't really stop in Kyushu. He thought to himself that, well, I can't really convert the people if I only stop in this small island, because Japan at the time was in the Sengoku period, the period where there were like hundreds of different countries, hundreds of different domains fighting against each other to claim the shogunate, to become the shogun, or like the military leader of Japan. So Japan still had an emperor, but the emperor was only the de jure emperor. He was the de jure ruler, but the de facto ruler would be the Ashikaga shoguns. So the Ashikaga shogunate was very much in bad shape at the time, so people were fighting each other to find, okay, so who's gonna be the next one to fight, and then to get the Ashikaga out of place and then become next shogun. So so Saint Francis Xavier, he thought to himself that I can't really preach to the entirety of Japan if I only stop here. So why not go to the capital of Japan, and then I can convert the emperor to Catholicism, and then the whole country will follow. This is a crazy idea. Obviously, even to today's standard, you cannot just jump like a few hundred blocks from like preaching to common people and then go ahead and preaching to the president, to the king, and then asking him to convert and all of that. But that was revolutionary. So he just went along with it. So he left Kyushu. He went to the capital of Japan at the time called Miyako, but later known as Kyoto, which is the old capital of Japan, contrasting it with Tokyo. So he went to Kyoto, and then he met the emperor. He had an audience with the emperor, and the emperor was pretty much very pleased with him. But he didn't convert. The emperor absolutely couldn't convert. The emperor of Japan, because of Shintoism, believed himself to be the descendants of the sun goddess Amaterasu. So how can he convert to a faith that pretty much recognizes no other foreign gods aside from the only God? So yeah, so that's why the emperor didn't convert. The emperor says, you know what, you guys chill. I'll let you guys stay here in Kyoto. So Saint Francis Xavier stayed in Kyoto. He built the first church in the capital of Japan. Then that church is still existing to this day. In fact, when I went to Kyoto in the year, last year I went to Kyoto, and I didn't really get to see the church, but I get to see a lot of Catholic heritage in Kyoto at the time. So it's a very much wonderful place, and the cathedral of the Diocese of Kyoto in Japan is called the Cathedral of Saint Francis Xavier. So you see that Saint Francis Xavier is a very much big influence on Japanese Catholics, the biggest influence actually. So yeah, he went to Kyoto, he preached, but then at first he was on very friendly term with the Buddhist monks, because the Buddhist monks heard that he was from India. So they thought to themselves, oh, this must be a new sect of Buddhism from India. This must be like a sect that recognizes this Jesus as a reincarnation of the Buddha or something like that. In fact, Saint Francis Xavier didn't really know how to translate the word God from Portuguese, from Latin to Japanese. So at first he used the word what's it called? Nichiren. I think it was at first he used the word Nichibosatsu, which means that the bodhisattva, the bodhisattva of the sun. So that's the sort of like the title that the Japanese Buddhists use for the Buddha. So his Japanese collaborators told him that, oh, the word God would most closely resemble Nichi Bosatsu in Japanese. So he went along with it, and the Buddhist monks were very much happy with that. So, oh, this guy must follow the same Buddha as us. But then later, Francis Xavier realized that no, Nichi Bosatsu is actually not the word for God, but the word for, well, the Buddha. So he thought to himself, no, this cannot be. So he invented a new word, Deus. So Deus is the direct translation from the Portuguese word Deus, which means God. So he used the word Deus now to refer to God, and then he preached Deus to the Japanese people. And now the Buddhist monks realized that, oh, we made a huge mistake. This guy is not from India. He's from a wholly different country. He wants to preach a new religion, and they fear that they would lose their influence over the emperor because of this. So they were very much against Francis Xavier, and then the emperor had no other ways but to ban him from Kyoto. So that's pretty sad. But then he went to Yamaguchi, which is a province close to Kyoto. So he went to Yamaguchi, and then he established another Catholic community there. Also became really successful. And in the year 1547 is the year that he came to Japan. Sorry, 1549. Oh, was it? Oh no, 1549 is the year he came to Japan, but 1551 was the year he left Japan. So he left Japan because he had new plans for other places to go evangelize. So he left Japan in 1551. He went back all the way to Malaysia and then to India, and then he heard from many people that China, at the time ruled by the Ming Dynasty, would be a very good place to evangelize. So he cooked up a new plan to go to China, and then to preach the gospel there. So yeah, that's like let me see here. So Japanese, right? So the 10th language, the actual final language of this entire challenge, it's gonna be classical Chinese, not Mandarin Chinese. Classical Chinese, the Chinese that people would use at the time to speak to each other and to write to each other. Back in the 16th century in the Ming Dynasty China, not Mandarin Chinese, which is the bastardized versions of classical Chinese. So yeah, it's gonna be classical Chinese, the last language of this entire challenge. So Saint Francis Xavier cooked up a plan to go to China, and he prepared trips and all of that. He went to Malaysia, and then 1552 he once again passed through my country, my hometown here in Vietnam, and then he went and resided on a Chinese island off the coast of the province of Fujian, modern day Fujian, called Shangchuan. So in Mandarin Chinese it would be Shangchuan. So he resided on the island of Shangchuan and prepared his way to cross the sea to go to Guangdong in southern China to preach the gospel. And everything was going really well. Everything was going pretty much awesome. Bam! He caught a fever. He caught a fever at the most pinnacle moment of his life to preach the gospel to the biggest country in the East. And he died. He passed away. He went to heaven on the December 3rd of 1552 at the age of 46. He still had a long way to go, but God called him back too soon, and then he went. So because of that, he had a whole plan for China. So that's why I'm going to study classical Chinese as well, because he would have had to learn classical Chinese back in India if he wants to prepare his way to go into China. So that's why it's going to be the last language that he's going to study. So after all of this introduction to the entire life of Saint Francis Xavier, all the way from his birth all the way to his death, through the 10 languages that I'm gonna present this challenge, I'm just gonna have to say, well, yeah, it's gonna be a really wide year learning all of these languages. So I'm just gonna allot a different time slot for each languages. For the easier languages, I'm gonna give them 5 weeks. For the much harder languages, I'm gonna give them 6 weeks. So yeah, it's gonna average around 54 weeks, which goes through like a full year. But that's just what I'm hoping to do right now. If I want to really get to know all of these languages in the whole year, to understand San Francis Xavier better from a linguistic perspective. Yeah. So I'm just gonna say the 10 name of these 10 languages once again. Uh, Number one, Navarro-Romance or Navarro-Aragonese. Number two, Basque. Number three, Spanish, Castilian Spanish or Continental Spanish. Number four, French. Number five, Ecclesiastical Latin. Number six, Portuguese. Portuguese in Continental, not Brazilian Portuguese. Number seven, Tamil. Tamil in southern India. Number eight, Malay, Bahasa Melayu, and Bahasa Indonesia as well. Yeah, in Malaysia and in Indonesia. Number nine, Japanese. Gonna brush up on that one. And number 10, Classical Chinese. So these are the 10 languages for the Xavier challenge that I'm gonna do this year. The 10 languages I'm gonna study in order to get to know St. Francis Xavier better as a person. It's gonna span a whole year, so let's see how I go. So I guess I'm gonna see you guys probably in a few more weeks for my first language, Navarro-Aragonese. Thank you so much for watching this. It's been like an hour. I've been speaking for a very long time, but yeah, I hope that it will be a fun journey for myself, challenge myself as a New Year resolution. And yeah, God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.